good old-fashioned mystery is one of my favorite genres. Now, if you ask the old lady, she's only interested in mysteries that involve murder, real murder. In fact, she can't fall asleep unless something is on TV that involves cold-blooded killing. The more horrific, the better for her. Just remember that in case I end up disappearing one day. Anyways, I'm drawn to these types of fictional shows because I like seeing things from several different perspectives. How elaborate and smart was the killer? What clues may have been left behind? How strong is their alibi? In order to get those answers, we usually end up following a detective around. And that's my favorite part of a good mystery. I love seeing how they interact with suspects, co-workers, witnesses, crime scenes, etc. You're going to be spending the majority of your time with the detective on the case. If you're bored with them, it doesn't matter how interesting the crime itself may be, you may find yourself tuning out before the conclusion. I have a lot of detective and crime shows that I like, but these are my three favorites, and three very different detectives they are. Coming in at number 3 is Adrian Monk. This is Tony Shalhoub's calling card, really. He just did a masterful job of portraying the quirky, afflicted genius.
It's a gift. And a curse.
Now, this show sometimes exposed you to the killer right away, but usually had you going along for the whodunit ride with Monk from the beginning. And on that ride, we get to see Monk and his assistant, either Sharona or Natalie. The beauty of the show, and really the character, was Monk's genius conflicting with his OCD. The murder of his wife, Trudy, really escalated his condition, and the show intertwined her death into a series-long mystery until Monk ultimately found out who killed his wife and why. The fun parts of the show was Monk's interactions with everyone around him.
We've been asking around, and the streets been saying he's some kind of super cop.
Well, I guess if other people say it, it's not really bragging. You feeling me there, Silent? He's feeling me.
While those he was around most typically understood and tolerated his behavior, it was the new people he encountered, usually the suspects, that provided the most entertaining moments of the episodes. My favorite episodes usually revolved around Monk being a different person, whether it was a bump on the head, new medication, or him having to go undercover as a mob boss. It was still Adrian Monk, but you were able to see him in a different light. And it's a credit to Tony Shalhoub. Anything I've ever seen him in, he's delivered. But Adrian Monk will always be his signature and best role. Number 2 is Andy Sipowicz. NYPD Blue was considered groundbreaking for its time. There was bad language, adult themes, they showed butts. You think times are strange now with people pretending to be offended by everything? Well, back when NYPD Blue aired in 1993, the bored and lonely housewives, along with their heroic white knight minions, made their presence known and wanted to boycott the show and any advertisers affiliated with it.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
And for a while, it actually worked. NYPD Blue was not shown in about 10% of households because the local affiliates caved due to the concerns. Now all that nonsense eventually blew over. The show was loved by critics and audiences, and the standout of the show was one Andy Sipowicz. Seems like Dennis Franz always played a cop, but he found his groove playing Sipowicz. He was able to showcase his range in this role. If you look at how Sipowicz was in his first scene compared to the scene in the series finale, you would see the definition of a character arc. He started off as a drunk, racist blowhard. He evolved into an honorable leader of his precinct. But what happens in between during the 12 seasons the show aired was a thing of beauty. His relationships with his partners varied with each one. David Caruso's John Kelly having to be a combination of Andy's babysitter and figurative big brother. Sipowicz didn't like too many people, but in his own way you could see that Andy loved and respected Kelly. Unfortunately, Caruso flaked out and left the show unexpectedly early on, which brought in a new partner for Andy. I don't think Sipowicz was a big fan of change. One of my favorite moments and one of the funniest was when Andy first met his new partner, Bobby Simone, played by Jimmy Smits. Now, we could tell right away that Simone was one of the good guys. But Andy wasn't having any of that shit. He just couldn't accept anyone new and let his lieutenant know right away.
Simone?
Yeah, that's not gonna work out.
What happened?
Oh, don't get me started. I mean, his attitude's all wrong. How you doing this type of thing?
He asked you how you were doing?
Yeah.
Of course, over time, Andy warmed up to him, and seeing their evolution together was a thing of beauty. It was also sad when it was time for Simone to go. After that, he got partnered up with Zach Morris and the Silver Spoons kid. And those were fine, but I thought the best dynamic was with Andy and Bobby. Now, the point of this video is to bring up my favorite TV detectives. With all the character development, the great writing and acting, at heart this was a detective show. NYPD Blue captured the grittiness of day-to-day cops in New York, and Sipowicz was a good detective. Deep down, we as viewers knew that Andy was a good guy. His co-workers knew it. That wasn't always patently obvious, but I always felt his true colors showed when dealing with the families of victims, dealing with scumbags to get information.
And I can't do nothing for that kid, 'cause some scumbag like you murdered him.
Dealing with the suspect that everyone knew did it.
I'm missing happy hour.
You prick! You prick! Go me! You prick! You killed her!
Sipowicz was never by the book or paint by numbers. And that's what made Sipowicz so unique. So many times, especially when it comes to detectives or cops, they become such a one-note character. Sipowicz never got the credit, in my opinion, for knowing how to read people and the route to take to get what he wanted out of them. Now, whether that was on the streets or in the interrogation room, Andy Sipowicz was a good detective. And Andy Sipowicz was a great character, portrayed by the great Dennis Franz. Number 1, Columbo. How could you not love Columbo? The formula was simple and the same for pretty much all 69
That was cool.
episodes. Show opens with the murder and the victim. Motive is explained. Death ensues. Cover-up begins. Columbo appears at the crime scene in his beat-to-hell 1959 Peugeot 403 convertible. At every crime scene, Columbo would come across something that everyone missed or something that just bothered him. From there, the murderer would usually appear. They would put on the act of shock and sadness. Columbo would introduce himself, and you could tell that the killer had a sense of relief that this disheveled, stumbling, confused, friendly detective was going to be the guy on the case that would need to catch them. But, as usual, before leaving, Columbo would ask a seemingly random question to the killer. A lot of times this would catch the murderer off guard. More times than not, the killer would have an answer. Little did they know that Columbo was getting the snowball rolling. And that, my friend, is the beauty of Lieutenant Columbo. He was always the smartest guy in the room, but made sure to come off as a regular guy who some people may start to think is a bumbling idiot. He got the criminals to bring their guard down, and unbeknownst to them, they would start digging their own grave. And once the killer let something slip, Columbo pounced. When Columbo finally knew who did it, he would set traps for them that would be their demise. And the killer usually knew that Columbo knew. And once that happened, their attitude towards Columbo changed drastically. What was once charming and quirky became very irritating to the suspect, and they went into defense mode. While Columbo episodes were formulaic, the fun part was how he interacted with everyone he met. Every suspect was different. There were some that he didn't like right off the bat, and those were especially good because Columbo dropped his shtick pretty quick and was out to get the murdering bastard. In those cases, he had no problem letting the suspect know he didn't like him, and he was going to prove how they did it. And those instances also led to some rare moments when Columbo would get legit pissed and yell at the perp.
I believe you killed Sharon Wanton, and I believe you're trying to kill Dr. Heidemann.
How is she? They won't tell me a thing.
What are you kidding? She's drinking because of you, because she thinks you're responsible for the death of her husband. You want to know something? So do I.
I can't give you that kind of information, Lieutenant. You're just gonna have to ask Dr. Collier.
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking you about a murder.
Another dynamic was when Columbo actually liked the killer. One of my favorites that comes to mind is the Johnny Cash episode. Typical Columbo formula where Columbo honed in on Johnny. Now, Cash knew his ass was grass, and Columbo set the trap and met him alone to explain how he knew he did it. In the end, you could see the mutual respect between the two. And Columbo had one of my favorite lines at the end.
Aren't you afraid being up here alone with a killer?
No, sir. Any man that can sing like that can't be all bad.
So there's so many reasons to love Columbo. If you ever get a chance to listen to Peter Falk talk about playing Columbo, do it. He really made that character his own, from the mannerisms, the wardrobe, even a car. It was all him. And I could put on an episode of Columbo, and before you know it, I'm watching the fourth one in a row. They just never get old. So there you have it. My 3 favorite TV detectives.
Just one more thing, please.
All right, I gotta go. The old lady's been watching her true crime murder shows again, and she keeps calling me in there for some reason. She's probably been getting ideas.